Sunlight gently streamed through the beautiful golden light from thin drapes stretches across the medical facility. The air was heavy with the smell of antiseptic. Lucas Donovan used to be a sterile and sharp titan in the business sector, and well-known for his brutal business acumen, gazed at the ceiling in blankness. Felt as if a ghost was imprisoned in his own body from the vehicle accident 6 months ago. Had the physicians referred to it as stolen his freedom. It's a wonder he lived, but Lucas saw no wonder in a life where his legs wouldn't go where his body would. Deceived him on a daily basis, once characterized by movement and strength, was now restricted to the chilly metal and a chair Mr. Donovan's hospital bed bars. His thoughts were disturbed by a clear voice. Was Dr. Rachel Evans's property. Stern doctor who had previously treated since the event, she has made adjustments to glasses and provided him with a qualified your home rehabilitation with a detachable grin starts today. Your new caregiver will arrive. Soon. Lucas didn't respond. He no longer gave a damn about routines, therapies, and the never-ending rotation. Nothing changed at the door of the therapists. Dr. Evans would never hesitate. Also said that this caregiver is somewhat distinct, but I think she could be Lucas. I nearly need what you need. Smiled as though he could get what he needed to return 2 kilometers to his former life. Amelia Harris went away and examined the written address on a shabby piece of paper. Her hands quivered a little. The majestic Donovan mansion stood tall before she as a marvel of steel architecture, and the clear sky reflected in the glass felt quite different from her little. Her apartment had 2 bedrooms, with her daughter Emily looking like a mother. Emily's little fingers gestured toward the water dancing in the driveway fountain, with her eyes glistening in the sunlight encounters with Amelia. The innocent wonder was able to grin. Isn't it lovely? Emily, my darling, nodded her brown locks, leaping like a princess. But Amelia wasn't here to listen to fairy stories. In order to survive, the last few months had late rent notifications have been harsh. Decreasing food supplies and the crushing burden of being a single mother following Emily's dad vanished without a trace. This work, no matter how difficult it may be, was her lifeline. Inhaling deeply, she went to the place while holding Emily's hand. Before she could reach the massive front door when the oak door opened, an elder lady with keen eyes and a tight bun. Amelia Harris, or you? The lady inquired, observing her with a mixture of doubt and curiosity. Yes, ma'am, Amelia, she said. Attempting, the lady took a stride to seem assured. Apart from that, I'm the housekeeper, Mrs. Peterson. They followed me through the corridors. Embellished with marble and priceless artwork floors that shone like reflections, Amelia felt uncomfortable wearing inexpensive shoes. Location, and she took Emily's hand in hers. Cooler, the air within was tighter and hauntingly silent. Like a museum without finally, life came to a halt outside a door. Mrs. Peterson is inside with Mr. Donovan. Paused, carefully selecting her words. He may be challenging, so don't put up with it. Amelia nodded personally, as she was used to the living itself had been challenging, for whatever long she could remember. As she entered the room first thing in the morning, the guy near the window caught her attention. In his wheelchair, Lucas Donovan staring at the expansive gardens outside, the sunshine emphasized his jaw carved, and the lines wrapped around. He seemed younger than she did. Anticipated mid-30 seconds, maybe, and yet really attractive in spite of the with fatigue engraved on his face. Mrs. Peterson Donovan said that this is Lucas, your new caretaker. Amelia Harris didn't look back. I don't need Amelia, the caregiver, moved ahead to firm voice. I'm here to assist Mr. Donovan. At last, he looked back, and there his eyes were a chilly, steely blue. Amelia, resigned and hardened by suffering, shivered, but she refused to back down. Are you aware of what you have committed to? His voice was low and tinged with this is not a case of resentment. She said, I'm not here for charity. I'm here quietly because I need this job and because you need a person who will not give up on you for a little moment. His expression may have been one of astonishment, but it disappeared as fast as it appeared. I'll provide. He responded dismissively. You have a week, are not very long-lasting. I'm not, Amelia straightened her shoulders. For the majority of individuals, the first days were in practice of fortitude and patience. Lucas's anger was an impenetrable barrier. He yelled at him and refused to help. recommendations, and made every effort to Amelia's talk with icy stillness, exhaustion, and back pain clawed at her. Yet she wouldn't let Emily leave her. Insatiable curiosity was the only thing that seems unconcerned by Lucas's cold manner. One day, as Aya got Lucas ready when he went in for his regular bath, "Emily, why is she holding her beloved stuffed bunny?" she said in a voice, "Are you sad, Mr. Lucas?" Lucas seemed shocked, innocent and pure. "I'm not sad," he said sternly, "Emily. Your eyes are sorrowful." Yet she cocked her head. Lucas parted his lips, then shut them. Amelia's heart was tight as he turned his head away. "Please, Emily, please let Mr. Lucas sleep." However, Emily took a step closer without moving. Her little hand was stretching out to Lucas. "Touch his. It's okay, Mama says. Hugs may occasionally help individuals feel better." A brief instant of widening occurred in Lucas's eyes, seemed to freeze, then hesitantly and slowly he held out his hand, allowing Emily's tiny fingers around his object. A fissure with a broken expression in Amelia, the fortress of his pain swallowed the lump that was in her throat. The slightest motion, yet it felt later the night, it became historic as Amelia Lucas's voice was ready to go. "Lo, you really believe that you can alter?" "I don't know her, but everything he asked acknowledged, but I won't give up." Trying, he nodded with a phantom grin. Grabbing his lips, "We'll watch," as Amelia couldn't shake as she turned to go. The sensation that something was changing, a long-sealed door, was groaning. Open, but they were unaware that the true test had not yet arrived, a time when would compel them to face their deepest anxieties and the potential for I hope the days merged into a repetitive cadence of actions and opposition. The world of Lucas Donovan remains characterized by his icy steel wheelchair, as well as the antiseptic atmosphere of his Amelia Harris's mansion appeared every morning. Her face is serene and determined in spite of his efforts to exert pressure her away, but each night as she departed, a persistent feeling of emptiness subsided. The house was silent above him. He didn't care that he was now overweight. To look too carefully, he failed to see the little noises from her footsteps in the silence, even the offune and the timbre of her voice. Emily's small tunes were humming on a Tuesday. Afternoon was wet, and Lucas broke his silence at last. "You're as Amelia adjusted," he mumbled. "Difficult." She didn't touch the pillows behind his back. "Look up. I've been referred to as worse than he, despite the tiny smirk. Why do you continue returning? Most individuals would have given up now," Amelia said, pausing her hands. "Being still for a time due to sickness, I'm not going to give up." He saw his eyes flutter with interest. The shadowy bags under her eyes, slight furrows on her forehead carved by fatigue and anxiety. There was anything more profound than her quiet outside of anything that has been built through adversity. Lucas, Emily's father, asked in a startling. Amelia's mouth dropped as he asked, tightened a little, and vanished when he couldn't, since she was only a year old. Managed the duty she took on. Chin looking into his eyes, "I made the decision to take care of Lucas's throat for us both." Constricted, the well-known pain of his insides were ripped apart by abandonment. Avoided for the most of his life attachment styles that reject love as a vulnerability, but this lady had been completely abandoned and was still able to keep herself together. "I apologize for the strange words," he muttered. Amelia shrugged. "Don't be a jerk on his tongue. Taught me to stand up for myself and Emily." Her gaze became softer. "And maybe I may impart fighting skills to others." Lucas averted his eyes, still staring at the rain was pouring down the window pane. Wanted to think she was telling the truth. While fighting had its purpose, hope was a hazardous thing that it often did, passing through your fingertips and departing that night. You were colder than before. Amelia remained longer than normal, was calmly coloring in the corner. The area was illuminated by the cozy warmth of the long shadows produced by a fading sunset. "Would you want to attempt crossing Ross's floor?" Amelia asked, her voice something new. Lucas raised an eyebrow in a forceful yet compassionate manner. "I just came onto a method that blends hydrotherapy with help stretching might be beneficial for your..." She clarified that muscular tightness might to enhance circulation. He was aware of she was really expressing that it may be useful to you. The words "walk again" remained unsaid. Between them, weighed down by brittle hope, Lucas clenched his knuckles and fists. White against his wheel's armrest's chair, the idea of hope seemed like a nasty jest, yet a little voice inside of him murmured that he had attempted to keep quiet, prompted him to respond. "Yes, fine," he answered at last. "Gruff, let's attempt a little grin." Amelia's lips curled. It was the first he had consented to anything more than the fundamental everyday growth. Regardless of how little work was still made in the pool in the Donovan estate was a perfect example of rarely. Marble and crystal clear water utilized the steam rose ever since the disaster. With quiet hums and delicate swirls of the Amelia, the water heater filled the quiet, used her hands to assist Lucas into the water. Cautious yet strong, he felt the warmth of the water engulfed him in an odd mixture of ease and susceptibility for the first period of months when he wasn't restricted to the his. Chair's stiff bounds loosen up. "Believe me," Amelia said, and he released a trembling breath. The strain in his Amelia's shoulders relaxed a little as she gently extends his legs. Hands assisting him and motivating him to water eased the strain on his legs, and he briefly had the impression that, "Normal, you're doing fantastic," she muttered. He didn't respond as her eyes met his, but he felt something stiffen in his chest, revealed in a manner he hadn't permitted to believe that for years there was no, "This is a rough wall between them," unvarnished truth. As she went about, her fingertips unintentionally touched his. It sent a shock of lightning into my hand. Unexpectedly and intensely through him, he saw her cheeks flush and her eyes enlarge. A little, but she didn't retreat. Additionally, he didn't later that evening after Lucas was discovered, after Amelia and Emily departed. Himself gazing at the mirror in the reflect his unwilling and motionless legs. Made fun of him, but for the first time the picture did more than simply make him angry. Her comments gave him a sense of resolve, replayed in his head. "Believe me, I can help you." Could he allow someone to enter after years of excluding everyone from the idea he was more afraid of the paralysis? Ever woke up the next morning as Amelia Lucas was taken into the living area, where we heard laughing as we arrived. Emily was seated with her legs crossed on the watching cartoons on the floor and laughing at the animated figures. The unadulterated her expression of unbridled joy was a stark in contrast to Lucas's life's shadows. Lucas stated in a quiet voice, "You know, I can't recall when I last laughed." Amelia's gaze shifted to his in that way. Combination of optimism and melancholy that you can realize that it's yet conceivable that he acknowledged that I'm not sure how Emily, unaware that their discussion had shifted, she smiled at Lucas, who wanted to watch. Mr. Lucas was hesitant about the notion of participating in such a basic, harmless activity, felt strange until Amelia's fingers touched it. Reason for brushing his shoulder and grounding him, he nodded slowly, but she didn't whisper it. Amelia assisted him in getting on the sofa, body stiff and unnatural. Yet as he calmed, in addition to Emily, the tenderness of the little girl Emily seems to soak into his bones, smiled and gave him a plush rabbit. "You're ready to be strangled, Bright." Unexpectedly he laughed, and it was hilarious. Wasn't much, but it was a start. Amelia was putting Emily to bed at night. She couldn't get rid of the sensation that Lucas's laughing was changing for some reason. Yet fleeting seemed like a fissure in the... He had surrounded himself with walls, and she waited at the doorway, observing Emily's. Her heart grew with regular breathing. She had accepted this job out of love and fear, out of need, but it was becoming more. Lucas was more than simply a patient after that. He was now a guy confined to his own anguish. As he reached for something he was unable to, she couldn't stop her phone buzzing. She believed it to be a text message from an unknown number. That you believe you can alter people like Lucas. Don't like him, Amelia. Change, exercise caution, as her blood flowed cold. Might see why she works here. Did it seem like her hand was in danger? Trembled as she switched off the phone. A feeling of fear took hold of her abdomen. She wasn't wanted here by anybody, and she was going to discover the reason for the SMS message hung like a shadow in Amelia's imagination. Missed every morning when she got to there was a shiver of fear throughout the Donovan estate. Someone was observing her in her tummy. Someone who didn't think that second chances, opportunities for Lucas, or maybe for her, erased the communication, but its memory was, Lucas was obstinate, but he had changed. Still wore his armor of skepticism. Yet he let cracks to grow. Amelia to use the pool to stretch his legs. He even put up with Emily's laughing. When she gave him her stuffed animal, she smiled. These were little bunnies for good fortune. Each step seemed as frail as glass. Amelia inquired, Memorable. Are you ready? One day when they were getting ready for Lucas, another hydrotherapy session breathed, his jaw as prepared as possible. She rolled him over to the side of the pool, his hands around his arms, holding onto his chair. The chlorine odor permeated. Now, Lucas sank into the familiar air. Warm water, assisted by Amelia, the liquid. He winced, clutching his unresponsive legs. Amelia remarked that his muscles were easily hardening. He inhaled slowly and shakily. Amelia walked behind him as he closed his eyes. His back was supported by her hands as she started the stretches that made him feel exposed. Exposed, but she was supported by her hands. Be cautious, Amelia, he said. Why do you have such faith in this? She hesitated. The question lingered between them because of, I've seen the results of giving up, she muttered, but I won't allow it to happen. Lucas opened his eyes to see what had happened to you. He felt for the first time in months a little bit of heat that wasn't from the water. It was a hesitant but genuine optimism. Abruptly, a piercing sound reverberated through the swimming pool area. The distinct sound of Amelia's head whipped, glass shattered. Around a huge window by the spiderweb crack was growing in the pool. A chilly breath of air crept in over it. What the devil was that? Her heart was racing. Lucas's physique and voice were tight. Amelia's thoughts was racing with stiffness. Was it just a coincidence, or was it related to the threatening text message? I'm not familiar with her, stuttered as she attempted to hide her terror. Voice, keep still. And I'll see what she got out of the water with her feet dripping wet. Squeaking against the broken tiles window had a little hole in the middle. Perhaps a rock had been hurled. As Amelia looked around, she saw that the grounds there were no people outside, and the wind rustled the bushes, but no one was in sight. She returned her heart to Lucas. I believe the pounding is simply children playing. Pranks, you don't know. His eyes narrowed, think she feigned a grin. It's okay, let's wrap up the meeting. But neither of them took the falsehood that after Emily went to sleep that evening. Lucas, I want to speak with you, so I phoned for Amelia. On the events of today, he said, his forceful voice. She paused. Lucas, I don't want you to be concerned about anything. Don't lie, he shot back, already frightened. Someone is threatening you, Amelia, aren't they? She turned her head away from her hands, bending together. It's most likely simply perhaps someone doesn't want me here. They believe I'm using you. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't allow anybody to exploit me. A sour grin appeared on her lips. Perhaps someone is trying to prevent you from becoming better still. The words lingered in the atmosphere. Lucas's mouth tightened at the thought that someone would undermine his advancement, would endanger the igniting of Amelia and Emily, a rage he hadn't experienced since the mishap. I will investigate who is responsible for this, he promised, but she shook her head, saying, You must, Lucas, concentrate on becoming better. His voice was steely, and I've been swept up in it. I declined, feeling helpless for months, allowing someone to take charge of my life. Amelia looked him in the eyes once again. Glistening, she wanted to keep him safe, protect him from the darkness, whatever it was. Skulking, but maybe he needed to defend oneself from the following days were stressful. And Amelia saw how Lucas kept staring at the windows of his. He started with his jaw set in grim resolve, inquiring about security with Mrs. Peterson, actions examining the reasons by through his study window. Amelia carried on with their sessions. But the shadow of terror was one that tracked her every move one night as he caught her as she assisted Lucas in getting into bed. He said, Stay tonight, wrist gently. Don't want you to drive her home by yourself. Lucas, you seized my breath. I can't force it. Not an order, but he demanded that the she was broken by the vulnerability in his gaze. Determination, she said in a whisper, and she made a deal. The PLH on the guest room sofa covers. She had trouble sleeping. The home was too quiet, and it was becoming late. With a creaking sound and veiled warnings, she was jolted awake, and her heart leaped to footsteps she fell out of. Her heart was racing in the corridor. Dark shadows that resembled claws crept on her bare feet toward Lucas's chamber. The door stood still on the chilly floor. She opened a container, and a person appeared, near Lucas's bed, which was partially dark. Lucas sobbed as the person whirled around, and Mrs. Peters' face was illuminated by the moon. Her eyes were full with hate. Therefore you should have remained gone, Amelia. Mrs. Peterson was shaken by Amelia's voice, hissed, defending what was rightfully mine. Doesn't need you or anyone else." Lucas opened his eyes and stirred. Amelia lunged as he said, "What's going on?" "Mrs. Peterson, please stop." But Mrs. Peterson pulled something out of her pocket, taking out a syringe with a transparent liquid in it. "I won't allow you to destroy everything," she said. An adrenaline rush that screamed through Amelia took a light out of the glass on the nightstand, broken when it made contact with Mrs. She sobbed onto Peterson's shoulder. The Lucas's syringe clattered to the ground. Amelia's eyes widened in terror. Peterson staggered, her expression contorted in, "You believe you've won, Fury, but this isn't." She ran out of the room. Vanishing into Amelia's shadows, Lucas grabbed for her hand as his chest heaved. His shaking fingers. "Are you all right?" He snorted, and she nodded, her eyes welling up. Down her cheeks, "We must contact the police." He swallowed hard. "Thank you, Amelia." They just maintained eye contact for a minute, the fear gradually fading into a frail feeling of security. When the cops showed up there, unsettling shadows created by flashing lights, officers searched the Donovan estate. Grounds, however. Mrs. Peterson had Amelia clutched Emily tight as she disappeared. The little girl's bewildered eyes. Lucas sat next to them, looking pale, but he assured her that she would be apprehended. "Won't harm you once more." Amelia's gaze looked through his. "And how about you, Lucas?" He clasped her hand in his. "Will you be all right? Hold on tight. I'm done being and hiding. For the first time, I'm terrified." Incident. He felt a weight on his chest. Lighter and no longer alone, Emily had defended him, and now it was his moment to defend them as dawn shattering. A bright light poured over dispelling the shadows of the mansion at night. Lucas looked at Amelia, clearly and resolutely. "Let him return home," remarked gently, her eyes sparkling with tears. "We are already in the days after Mrs. Peterson's treachery became hazy. Like a half-remembered police nightmare, patrols often went around the estate, and since security had quadrupled, Amelia was unable to dispel the sensation that someone was remaining waiting while concealed in the darkness, awaiting the ideal time to attack. But in the midst of the dread that something else might bloom since that night there, Lucas had changed. Was there a spark of renewed resolution in his eyes? It was absent prior to. The guy who were once buried under layers of resentment was developing little by like a phoenix emerging from the ashes. Amelia discovered him one clear morning in observing the study via the window with an unfamiliar expression, smart decision-making. She welcomed me gently in the morning and set a cup. He looked at the coffee on his desk. There was a silence as they met her morning. Burdened with unsaid words, Lucas looked back up to her after looking down at his legs. "Would you want to attempt standing today, Amelia?" Lucas gasped. "But I know it may not work," he remarked hastily. "But I'd want to try." Must attempt. A burst of terror and pride swept through her. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it in the therapeutic room." Was infused with the aroma of machine noise and disinfection. A stream of sunshine dreamed through the windows that apply gold paint to the floor, and sitting in his wheelchair was Amber Hughes Lucas. He gripped the armrests tightly. Amelia knelt next to him, her gaze unwavering. "And warm wek, go slowly," he nodded. She wrapped an arm and said, "I'm ready," jaw tight. Holding him on 3 legs around his waist. 1, 2, 3. He used his arms to press his legs' muscles scream in protest. Weak and unaccustomed to the agony lanced, wobbling his body was piercing and relentless. Sweat trickled down his brow, yet he clenched his jaw and struggled for a moment. His weight changed in a second, and his legs, he was standing on his own 2 feet. The oxygen poured out of his lungs as he tilted, then he slumped as his knees gave way. No, the word tore returned to the chair. Amelia, raw and shattered from his throat, firmly grasped his hands and fingers. "Lucas," you got up, and he shook his head, frustration and embarrassment coloring his. "It doesn't matter that I couldn't hold your gaze. It matters that," she interrupted. "You made a bold step, and that's what issues you battled and never gave up on." Emotions swirled in his chest. Perilously near the surface, he wanted to weep, scream, and vanish, but he was stabilized by Amelia's stare. "You're not alone yourself in this," she said, muttered, "I see something right here." The barriers he constructed cracked inside of him. Surrounding his heart started to fall apart. Why, he remarked in a scarcely audible voice. Why do she grinned and shed tears? You care so much. I see you, and her eyes are glimmering. I think that Lucas is the real you. He closed his fingers and eyes, squeezing hers for the first time. Months passed, and the darkness only slightly decreased. The estate was quite quiet that evening. Amelia sat outside her on the balcony, the chilly night air sweeping over her room. The stars gleamed over faraway cheekbones. Timeless knocked gently on the door. Lucas forced her to turn and turned into the room. His eager but haunted eyes, he inquired, "Can't sleep?" And she shook her. Too many ideas in his brain. He paused. Looking closer, I appreciate Amelia's. Her heart grew as she smiled at everything. I do, therefore you don't need to thank me. I took a deep breath. You've given me something I believed I had lost forever. What is that? I hope the vulnerability was captured in her breath. The unadulterated honesty in his gaze made her. She extended her fingers in a sadness. You also offer me hope by caressing his cheek. Lucas touched her eyes and leaned forward. Momentarily shutting down, the world held its when he opened his eyes. The breath she gasped at the intensity of his stare. Gone. I'd want to give standing another go. A tear ran down her face as she walked to life. I'll be at your side at every turn. How his lips hovered as he leaned forward. She closed the gap close to hers. Amelia. Her mouth gently touching his reluctant kiss. Yet it was a kiss full of pledges with common suffering, and brittle I want the world vanished, leaving only the two of them were connected by anything more powerful than dread when they drew their foreheads back and rested their breaths blending together. Whatever occurs, she said, I'll deal with it. His grin was genuine and unfettered. Grin together in the next weeks were a tornado of development, and Lucas pushed himself harder in spite of failures. His resolve is more scorching than ever. Flames. Amelia followed him everywhere, her support as a constant light in the gloom, and then it occurred one day. They were in the sunshine of the treatment room. Streaming using windows, Lucas pressed his knuckles on the parallel bars. Amelia, who was white, stood before him, eyes full of steadfast faith in "You can do this," she murmured quietly, and he nodded. His jaw was clenched as he took each stride. His muscles trembled as he adjusted his weight. He raised and hovered his left foot, and then landed just a couple inches ahead of a genuine firm step, his chest constricted, and he sobbed. Threatening to escape, he grabbed another stride, followed by more tears. His eyesight became blurry, but he continued. His arms had Amelia's hands on them. Holding him steady, "Lucas, you're doing it," glanced up with awe in his eyes, and astonishment that I'm really walking. Tears were running down her face as she murmured, "Cheeks you are." He continued to walk and fell into her arms and was embraced by her, their hearts thumping in unison. Without you, he couldn't have accomplished this," Raw replied in a voice that made her grin. Her tears, and we accomplished it together. They sat on the terrace in the evening. The sky is painted with gold hues by the sunset, and Crimson Emily was playing next to her. Lucas heard a tune in the air and laughed. Amelia's hand, with his fingers interlacing, I never imagined feeling alive in hers. She laid her head on his once again. The unexpected is a feature of daily existence. He turned to face her, his eyes kind. "I love you. I adore you, Amelia." You made her heart sing. Lucas. When the sun sank under the horizon, they held one another in the darkness is no longer a cause for alarm. They had overcome it and emerged more resilient. Together, and for the first time their scars seemed like beginnings rather than ends.